Yes, this is Kuldeep Singh Randhawa. I've made a few videos which have been embedded onto the website www.realrandhawa.com. I'm talking about one of the crimes under the section heading Canadian Crimes of the website. The crime is the tax fraud by CRA. Just want to make sure that this is a tax fraud involving the Canadian Revenue Agency, who colluded with former partners of mine. Proving that, clearly one requires a full investigation to be done. But we can assess from the evidence and the facts that we have an institution that was clearly involved in tax fraud. The issues are quite simple to understand, but the difficulty is always going before a judge who is honest, or having a matter investigated, or finding an accountant who does not compromise the standards of the accounting profession. A report was done by a former accountant of mine, Vijay Shukamuru, who created a report which was sent to the CRA for the correction of the fraudulent assessment that was done by Carolyn Walsh, where expenses were excluded from a subdivision. So what are expenses? Most developers know this, that if you build a house, the cost of the concrete for the footings may be $20,000. So that is an expense of building a house. So when the property is sold, that expense can be deducted. Most accountants know this. Bookkeepers know this, justices of the Supreme Court clearly know this, and more certainly the Canadian Revenue Agency, which has this printed on their website about expenses, clearly know this. The lawyer Ron Hunnock of Zuckerman Law definitely knew this, because he was informed by me to stop the crimes where he was deceiving my wife in a family proceeding, which actually is not a family proceeding. So this video is also of benefit to Madam Justice Choi, who is one of the justices who can set aside that fraudulent proceeding where crimes were being done by a lawyer and legal assistants who were preparing these affidavits and deceiving my wife, despite having been told that you have to cease and desist. And so the public can now appreciate why I'm preparing a number of these notices that can be used to correct the fraudulent evidence that's been submitted to proceedings where judges are deceived and some justices are compromised or perhaps even oppressed. The only justice that I'm prepared to give some benefit of doubt is Madam Justice Choi. The proceeding that she dealt with, I did actually write to Register Nielsen that there's problems on file and that basically the entire matter should not have gone ahead when the order was made by Madam Justice Choi. So this was criminal contempt of her own order. So that's a pretty serious charge. And continuing with that proceeding was clearly an issue. But submitting evidence and then not correcting it itself is a major problem. So the expenses for a subdivision that was done in Oliver, involving two former partners, Janelle Singh Gill and Damanjit Singh Gariwal. These were individuals I trusted because they were, one, Sikhs, and also Sikhs who had done some community service. So I believed that these were individuals who cannot be compromised. I was clearly incorrect in that. So the expenses are things like street lights, fills, soils, hydrants, pipes, pavement, concrete for the sidewalk, and I can go on. And so the expenses for a subdivision, for a 37 lot subdivision in Oliver, BC, the expenses were in excess of $1.8 million. And so Carolyn Walsh from CRA prepared this fraudulent assessment with a view that it was never going to be corrected and that she would never be investigated. And despite the report issued by Vijay Shikamuru, the corrections were not made. So I'm clearly aware of the processes. But when you've got a situation where some accountants who were clearly told that this is a crime taking place by lawyers and institutions like CRA, they eventually get compromised. And they do so because lawyers tell them it's okay to do this. Go ahead and deceive the courts and don't worry about it, you won't be investigated. And so they have firms who support this, such as KPMG. And these matters are clearly going to be reported to the RCMP now in many jurisdictions. But I did report this crime of theft because fills went missing, soils were taken away, and that is also a tax evasion by my former partners. And I recall reporting this to the RCMP in Oliver that things were stolen from me and I want an investigation done. No investigation was done there. So I took it further to the police commissionaires in Kelowna to file a complaint against the police officers who never investigated, and nothing came out of that. And so now the people will realize what's really taking place here is that there's a number of institutions involved in crimes, and when honest citizens report this, the matters are never investigated. Because the original fraud of the engineering issue with APEC BC, in order for that to succeed, they have to destroy a person who's honest. And so I would like to ask the RCMP in Oliver a simple question. Is stealing not a crime in the jurisdiction of Oliver? If I come there and steal a car and just drive away, you're not going to investigate it? Are these crimes permitted in the town of Oliver? Is this how policing is done in BC? And the town of Oliver staff that clearly have professional engineers who were bound by ethics clearly knew that the fills were being taken away and claiming that you don't know where they went. And I've told you about the CRA tax fraud and that those reports should be ignored and we should not go ahead with any tax sale because the whole purpose of excluding expenses of $1.8 million and above was so that profits will be inflated that clearly were not made. So now you have a fraudulent tax liability created by CRA who then go in and sell these lots. And on one of those lots, which we were going to develop, there's now a house built. So if that house is now taken down, because that property really doesn't belong to that person, who's going to pay the damages to this person who's built a house there? I don't even know who the person is yet. I'm clearly going to be finding out. But you were clearly told to investigate this and you didn't. Ron Hunick was clearly told there's a crime by the CRA. Stop submitting fraudulent reports. And you continued deceiving my wife. So this is how the crimes are taking place. And when the CRA doesn't correct it, then you have Department of Justice lawyers going into court. And I recall there being a Chambers application where I cautioned the lawyer that if you proceed with this application, I'm going to have you arrested. And so this lawyer, prior to the proceeding actually going ahead, runs out of court, and in her stead, another lawyer is appointed who continues. Now, this lawyer is in a position to say, well, I never prepared the application because the person who did the fraud had left the courthouse. And I recall standing in front of a judge with a binder 3 inches thick and saying, this is the binder of expenses that the CRA has excluded. The binder was 3 inches thick, full of papers showing all those expenses and the liability of the mortgage being paid out and so forth. And what happens? The judge tells me to leave the court. The sheriffs walk in and escort me out. I would like to think that the sheriffs have a mind of their own. I would like to think that their IQ is in excess of 80, and that you realize that these are crimes taking place and that you are witnesses to those crimes, and your function is not to simply harm victims and obstruct justice. And so, Madam Justice Choi, when I wrote to Register Nielsen, I clearly raised the concerns, and then the matter was sent back to you. And then you referred the matter to another judge, and that judge happens to be Justice Verhoeven. I'm quite certain you know this by now, but in case you don't, you now have been told that when I went to that proceeding, I wanted to know who the judge was, and I was not told, but my name was registered. But when the proceeding started, my testimony was blocked. It was an online hearing. And so I went to the RCMP in Newton, where I alerted the police that my testimony has been blocked intentionally, and I want an investigation done. Has an investigation been done? I then proceeded to the New Westminster courts, where I discussed this matter with the sheriffs. I clearly told them what had happened. What did you do? Did you carry out an investigation? These are serious crimes that occurred, and these happened in the Gateway proceedings as well, where Chief Justice Christopher Hinkson issued an order ex mero moto for my judicial inquiry. And those 3 lawyers at Lawson Lundell did not turn up. Instead, 2 other lawyers came to carry on with the fraud, where they're in a position to say, we were not lawyers for this entire proceeding. We're just acting, we're just turning up, and they keep referring to this order of Justice Verhoeven, which clearly is an order done to protect the institutional crimes. And Justice Verhoeven clearly knows this. He's committed many crimes up until now. And so, Madam Justice Choi, you have an opportunity here, because if you have been oppressed in some way, set aside that divorce proceeding, because that is not a family proceeding, it's a proceeding of crime, where justices are compromised and lawyers are submitting fraudulent evidence, knowingly that they're not going to be investigated. And so I will be reopening this file for the subdivision, where Janelle Gill actually even attempted to donate some of the fields to the Sikh temple. Now, if it was a donation, I have no issues with that. But if he made that donation so he could then say in the discovery that I donated it to the Sikh temple, and then not tell those people in the temple that 95% of those fields or so, whatever that amount is, was pocketed by him. So he's using a Sikh temple to do his fraud. What is the World Sikh Organization going to do about these kind of Sikhs who are corrupting and doing crimes? And are you aware of this? Is it your job to simply remain silent and keep on saying to other Sikhs, oh, be brave, and talk about what happens in the past? Because a lot of Christians are questioning this. And to my freedom fighters out there, keep an open mind. Yes, a number of Sikhs have done wrong, but it's because there's a number of people within the institutions who are Christians, or some are appointed from the other religions, who are corrupted. And they're doing these crimes. And Justice Verhoeven is clearly aware that he's doing the crimes. And so their way of keeping out a victim to say, this is a vexatious litigant, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, $1.8 million expenses is not a difficult thing for me to assess. This is why I came up with this 1+1 analysis. All of these crimes are simple to prove. So why is it that those lawyers who once acted for me did not come forward? What were you afraid of? All it requires is one lawyer to go into court and say, this water tank didn't have any pipes, guys. Mr. Randhawa has been put out of business intentionally. Are you so afraid to speak the truth that you would commit 100 crimes as opposed to speaking the one truth? Where is your ethics? Where is your morality? And Prime Minister, stop making statements that it's going to take time to resolve this systemic racism, which actually is systematic racism. All it requires is an investigation of the Supreme Court of BC, an investigation of 7 judges that is not going to be done by the Judicial Council, who are basically fully aware that judges are corrupt in BC. And so all I can say to my family is to be cautious. Reach out to me. My brother in the UK, he's holding my funds. Return that with court-ordered interest to me. Do not return it to the Vancouver Supreme Court, where judges and lawyers are doing crimes. And that's all I'm going to say, that we need to change this nation very quickly. And I'm requiring, in fact demanding, that our Prime Minister order an investigation of the Supreme Court and APEC BC. Thank you.